So good afternoon and welcome to our next panel. That's we're starting off right now. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Craig Smith, the chairman of Green Building Association. We're going to be talking about greening property and renovating the existing stock, I think is going to be most of our topic. And also we'll cover some of the new projects and a bit on the design side and new things that are going on. The first part, I'd like just to have our panelists introduce themselves. And Luis, if we can start with you, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company.
My name is Luis Irastorza. I am from Spain, Madrid. I live in Madrid, Spain. I'm responsible for the Castellana Extension project in Madrid, which is a big project which is going to transform the north of the city. It has about 312 hectares of surface and about 4 million square meters to be built. It's a project for the next, I would say, 15 years. And it's mixed use, 50%, around 50% residential, 50% office buildings, commercial hotels. Construction to be started in around 3 years, we estimate, our estimate.
Okay, great, thanks. And Andries?
Name is Andries van der Walt. I'm head of sustainability at Cushman and Wakefield, based in London. Historically, my role has been UK, just expanded to EMEA. I'm in a client-facing position. Cushman and Wakefield, of course, is a commercial property consultancy. My role is across the property cycle, working with developers in helping them deliver sustainability in new developments, but also working with corporate occupiers and investor clients to help drive sustainability through their property portfolios.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Peter Wilhelm. I'm the CEO of Wilhelm & Co. We are developer and also long-term investor in large mixed-use projects anchored by shopping centers. I'm based in Brussels, Belgium, where I think in this field and shopping center we are the market leader. We are also present in France, France, Italy, Portugal, and Serbia. For what concerns sustainability, we developed in Belgium the first BREEAM certified shopping center, the first European BREEAM retail certified shopping center. I'm also a member of the board of ICSC, and on behalf of ICSC, as I'm the local guy from Belgium, I usually handle the negotiation with European Union for what concerns energy performance of building, etc. So you are most welcome to ask me a question on that field.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Billand from the board of directors from Union Investment Real Estate in Hamburg. We are a German open-ended fund. We have 6 funds and the majority is retail funds for private investors in Germany. We have about 20 billion euros real estate under management. Yes, and we started about 4 or 5 years ago to go the green way, the green route, and to completely adapt all our procedures, our investment policies, and as well our portfolio where it makes sense. We have to discuss where it makes sense and where not into sustainable investments and certified buildings, and we'll give you later an example of a transformation of an old existing office building into a modern building, saving a lot of energy and carbon emissions. Thank you.
Frank, thank you. And just coming back to you, with any current or future purchases, how important is it that the building is either LEED or BREEAM certified?
We have set up a so-called sustainable investment check. Being in 26 countries, you can't have always this variety of certification systems: LEED, BREEAM, DGNB from Germany, HGÖ, or what else. So it is very complicated. We developed our own system. which is more or less a scoring system based on the same major criteria as all these systems. And it is in our application memorandum for investments, just one page where the result is shown, and you have a scale from dark red to green, and there's an arrow where the result will show, and if the arrow is in the red area for the new investment, you need, as an investment manager, very good arguments instead to buy it. For example, okay, we buy a building with an old facade, but the facade will be exchanged and there will be refurbishments going on. So that is introduced, and today it is really obligation in each of our investments to have a certain quality. I can tell you it's a real challenge because we can't export the German understanding of green buildings to all over the world as soon as you, especially we are focused very much on shopping centers, and it's incredible how different the understanding, especially of the technical maintenance standards in shopping centers are, especially when you cross the Alps southwards.
So you will buy them. I mean, you will buy a product that's not, let's say, green yet, as long as you can internally see that you can make it to the standard that you want in the future. Yeah?
That would be a no-go for us, and simply because we don't see a future in this type of buildings, and it fits to the whole story here at this MIPIM as well, that we are all chasing prime core assets, and this is only 15% of the market maximum, and the rest, there's no interest. That is simply the problem we have with our existing assets. So we are chasing very good, high-quality assets. Our investors are very risk-averse. We are not looking for value-add or something of this stuff, and therefore it should be in the green area.
Okay, great, thanks. Andreas, I know you've got this fantastic this fantastic survey that you've done, and if you wouldn't mind showing us a couple of the slides and let's say giving us kind of a little overview of what who you've interviewed and and what some of the results have been.
Pleasure. Yes, so Cushman and Wakefield just completed a survey of key European real estate investors. We used an external research company called Remark to do this, and we've literally just completed this. The aim was to establish views on sustainability as a driver for real estate decisions, for investment decisions, and how it impacts on the business strategies of investors. We surveyed managing directors or senior fund managers for this, as we wanted the investment view rather than the sustainability view. And you can see the list of companies, list of organizations involved in the survey on the slide. So I'll just spend a couple of minutes running you through the key findings from the survey. I apologize for the dense text on the slide, but I just wanted to sort of hit the key points. So what we're seeing is that about 2/3 of these, it's not a statistical study, it's an in-depth interview study, but the numbers are still, I believe, indicative. So 2/3 of these 24 companies are implementing corporate sustainability policies at the fund level, and some of this gets really refined and sophisticated, where they have slightly different policies for each of the funds. So for an industrial fund or a retail fund, they may have a slightly different policy. The motivation is very clearly both ethical but increasingly commercial. They don't just do it because it gives them a warm and fuzzy feeling. It's because it makes business sense. More than 50% think there is a value differential now, even considering the paucity of data and the lack of firm data to support this. Investors think believe there is a value differential now, and everybody believes there will be a value differential in the future. There's a lot of debate still over whether it is a green premium, whether we're talking about a green premium, i.e. higher rents, better value, or whether it is in fact a brown discount. In other words, the failure to achieve expected values, or whether in fact, and this is my own view, it is a mix of the two. Generally, as you would expect, very few were willing to, respondents were willing to try and predict what that value differential would be. So a bit of crystal ball gazing. What is interesting is that there's very little expectation actually of achieving higher rents from investors is the idea that they've given us. And they see the value instead primarily in better asset performance through fewer voids and in the ability to attract better occupiers. So about a quarter of the respondents are already applying adjustment factors for sustainability when they're calculating yields. They do it in different ways, looking at obsolescence or income growth potential, but they are applying, 25% are applying adjustment factors, and there's a real perception that that is something that they will start doing if they don't already. Energy efficiency, unsurprisingly, is considered the key issue that will impact value, and that is because the link is much clearer, as we all know. What I personally found surprising is that something like exposure to flooding, which I actually think could have a very real and significant impact, was rated fairly low. And also surprising is that green credentials were scored fairly low as a factor that would impact value. In other words, BREEAM LEED rating is not necessarily considered as the factor that will determine value. It is about very specific things around energy use, to a lesser extent, waste and water. So 3/4 evaluates acquisitions in terms of their sustainability, and most use some consistent methodology for that, although the expression art form came out quite a few times. In terms of sustainability as a risk to value, most think it's too difficult to quantify at this stage and have not tried to do so. Some have done it successfully, claim to have done it successfully, but very few. Very clear in the minds of investors is that occupiers play a key role, A, as drivers of the market, drivers of the demand for green buildings, but B, also in terms of the delivery, because reality is 80 or more % of an investor's or landlord's carbon footprint is actually in occupied space outside of its direct operational control. And then on the last point, which is the theme of today, is that 90% of respondents see improving sustainability of a building as a means of increasing its value, and they see a real opportunity there. Thank you.
Thanks. And Peter, after hearing that, what's your comments, being a pretty big shopping center owner, and would you agree with some of these comments that were made in the survey, or how would you have judged them?
Well, mostly yes. I think what's interesting to notice is there has been a real evolution in the last 4 or 5 years. I remember when we started certifying getting a BREEAM certification for a shopping center 5 years ago, and I was talking about it to investors. They said, "Oh, great," but obviously they didn't really know what I was talking about, because besides England, Great Britain, nobody knew really what BREEAM was. Today, it's a completely different environment. So really, can you afford not to take care of sustainability? The answer is clearly no. But I think for very good reasons. The first one is the market requires that. The number two is because with rising energy costs, it becomes obvious that just that is a very good reason. And I think in a certain way it's quite good, because at the very beginning I was always hearing, why do you want to be sustainable? Because of social responsibility. Now, it's great to hear that, but very frankly, I never really believed that the first motivation of senior management of companies was social responsibility. We are not all Mother Teresa-like people. So today there are real economic reasons and good reasons to be sustainable. What is interesting, on the other hand, is that I think there is an evolution, because at the very beginning, no one was really taking care of that. Then there was what I call the marketing phase, when it became really a marketing issue. And it was funny, I was attending at ICSC a lot of meetings with EU, etc., about sustainability. And when you were receiving the business card of the people involved, you noticed they were marketing managers. So it was basically a marketing strategy more than a real sustainability strategy. Now I think we are in a new phase. It's no longer strictly a marketing strategy, and which means also that we will start doing a very interesting thing and maybe avoiding doing and using some gimmicks, which, I mean, before the meeting we just spoke about green roofs. I don't believe that the green roof is so essential for sustainability, but so it's becoming very professional and very interesting, I think, from now on. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to come back on the marketing strategy. We actually asked that questions of the respondents, and it's the one question that we asked that got a very negative response because people don't want to be seen, or they didn't want us to appear to suggest that they're doing it purely for PR reasons. So I think there has been a move on, and it's now seen as a no-go area.
Certainly no longer, but at the beginning there was
no,
some
absolutely.
marketing involved in that. Yeah.
Well, look, it looks like the marketing guys have done their job and sold it on, and now someone's actually got to deliver. Luis, can you give us a little bit of overview of just some comments and some numbers that you've got regarding sort of global warming and things those nature?
Well, being responsible of long-term development of a long-term project, I think we have to look. Things have changed a lot in the last few years, but probably going to change, in my humble opinion, dramatically in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And this is the synthetic, the most synthetic flow, which shows why things are going to change. This is the energy flows, world energy flows. And we see there that, on the left, there's the combustibles, coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. But on the right, there's the use, the final use. And we see buildings there, it's 39.3%, whole world figures. That is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change figure of 2004. Okay, and that does not count for energy, in-body energy, and does not count for urban planning, for urban transport. So any agreement which we have known that we have the goal for reduction of 50% world reduction, 80% in developed countries, plus 2 degrees, that is has to come in the next 4 or 5 years, will necessarily induce big changes, enormous changes in the efficiency of buildings and also of urban planning. Okay, and I would like to concentrate. In the second part, if there is time, I will tell you what we're doing in our project, but this is one of the main drivers of a development which we should take place starting 2014 and 2025, 2030. Well, energy and water are probably the most important issues in a long-term project. And this slide, which seems a little bit complex, is the forecast date of the peak of oil production. And this is the deepest study which has been carried out. It is by the United Kingdom Energy Research Centre, which has taken the 13 the most important studies and put them on a diagram. And then we see, of course, it depends. The peak of oil production, oil is about 33% of primary energy used in the world. Probably going to be reduced little by little, but it will still continue to be very important. And now this is even more important in our days, where the oil barrel is over 100, about 120, and Well, we see that all the studies, especially the most important studies are the one by International Energy Agency and by the US Geological Survey. They estimate a peak of oil production around 2030. And those have been, the International Energy Agency study was done of 75% of oil reserves. So it is quite a deep study. So in some way, I would say that what I want to point out is that the date of oil production is very uncertain, and that big changes can be coming in the near future. And third, that we consider energy and climate change probably the two main drivers in economy, and without any doubt in building sector and in urban planning.
Okay, great, thanks. I think maybe we'll move on a little bit to Andreas, to you again. When you were talking about the surveys and the survey that you had done and on the investors, what sort of responses are you getting from the sort of end users and some of the bigger global end users, and what are they looking to do? Office space, let's say people taking up office space, warehouse, bit on retail.
Well, I think investors are right in saying that occupiers are driving demand, they're driving the market. Listed companies, it has become so integral to brand, and with the awareness around also delivery that it can't be just brand, there is a lot of attention. The end users are all have sustainability strategies in place. I think there's a real disconnect at the moment still between corporate strategies and how they actually apply it to their real estate. But there is now greater recognition that that gap exists and that they need to address it. And it does depend on how a brand defines itself. If you are going out as a green brand that base your entire business strategy on sustainability, then you absolutely have to be at the forefront. But for others, it will be less important. But there still is quite a significant disconnect.
And so in non-certified buildings, are a lot of investors just discounting them, or is that happening yet, or is that coming into play, or are they falling by the periphery? Has that already hit the market, or is it coming in the next years?
I think the market is at different stages of maturity in different countries. There's quite a lot of geographical variation across Europe. As I showed on the slide, about 25% of investors, 25% of those we talk to, about a quarter of them are applying adjustment factors at the moment. But I don't think we've reached the stage yet where a building becomes completely unsellable just purely based on sustainability.
And Luis, you made a pretty scary graph up there. Well, I had to ask Andreas a question just to sort of think about this graph that you had and how technical or unusual it was. Maybe you could print out a copy of that for everybody to take with them on the way home. But so if we're going to hit, I mean, are you running into investors and developers and end users that are actually starting to get a bit scared that there won't be enough energy to run their buildings and run their operations yet? Maybe not scared is the right word, but is it slowly setting in that they better be using less and less energy if there's actually going to be an energy crisis where there isn't enough to go around?
Well, I have no doubt that the main drivers in the short, medium term in economy, and especially in urban planning and in the building industry, which are responsible for over 50% of consumption, is the challenges are very, very big. And I feel that we need very important and dramatic changes in the sector. And let me just tell you about what we have in the European community. We have the EPBD 2010, the European Performance, the Energy Performance Billing Directive 2010, which states that in 2020 all new buildings need near zero energy. Of course, that agreement, what almost near zero energy means, has to be decided by local authorities through building codes. But what is near zero energy that would be applied for public buildings in 2018. What is expected is a reduction of 70–80% at least, and of course that has to be economically viable in the life cycle of the building. So that is on the side of the building. In urban planning, the urban model is enormously responsible for the quantity of energy used in the buildings and in the transport. If you have a very, this is the debate between diffuse or dense or diffuse model of cities. Of course, the urbanism necessarily has to change. And we cannot forget that Kyoto Protocol, which applies only for developed countries and economies in transition, 39 countries except the US, is ending in 2012. I personally do not foresee any possibility of agreement before 2012 because of the incapacity of the American administration to approve a law which was approved in the Congress in 2009, which needs a majority of 60 senators, when the Democrats have only got 51 senators. But it will necessarily happen in next, I would say, of course, in this decade. Well, this is things as I see things, and I think anybody who is planning in the future, like we are, needs to have these ideas in mind.
Well, thank you for that. And getting on to that, well, Frank, I know you have a specific building or a specific project that you would like to talk about and give us some examples of how you're making it sustainable and green and I'm under the it's a renovation, yes? So.
To start with a bit broader question, who is driving green building development and turning into green? So who is the driving force, and second, who pays for it? And in terms of the question who drives it, to be realistic, in our office portfolio in Germany, and I would say as in the rest of Europe, for 90% of our tenants, it doesn't play any role. The average tenant we have in our office buildings, the average lease pay per square meter is 15 euros, so they find it interesting, but it's not a consideration for them. And first statement. Second statement, it is very clear the one who has to pay for it is the investor and the owner and not the occupier. You don't get higher rental payments for that. So what is about the 10% of our office tenants and the potential ones we are fighting for? If there is an asset in a really trophy location of a city, in a very central location, where you are chasing the most expensive tenants in the city, chartered accountants, law counsels, and so on, then it is a requirement. It is a requirement especially for existing buildings, and I think most important is in our cities in Germany and most of Europe, we have to think about the existing stock. There's a major requirement to do something. And it's just one tick in their list of requirements when tenants decide, do I move there, yes or no? And one box is sustainability certification and all that. And if there is nothing and no, then you have a problem. And that is one example here we have in Hamburg, just next to our headquarter. It's it's a presentation I gave to the ULI conference in Paris. Sorry for not adapting it, the logo to MIPIM here, but I think it's fairly new and we can use it. It's a typical situation where we have an existing office building in our stock, and we had a long-term lease. It was a sale and lease back from the 80s. It was a Unilever headquarter in Germany. The building is the designing is from the 50s. It was started into operation in 61, and Unilever moved out. Another consideration. The big tenants, the single tenants, more and more move out and change their buildings and their locations. We are more and more careful with single tenant buildings. We are now transforming this one into a multi-tenant. So what to do? And let me flip through so you can see here, it is really inside the inner circle of Hamburg. It is a prime location with a very high land price. And so it was very far. Here's a little bit the history of that building, the existing one from the 50s. It is a heritage listed building because it has it is post-war architecture. By the way, I learned in Paris they presented to this ULI conference another listed building for architecture. And the reason was it is a very rare example of architecture as it should have never been built. So, and therefore they listed it in Paris. That is something that can happen as well. But in that case, it is classical heritage issue. The total capex here is nearly 300 million euros. And here you can see in order to make it feasible to completely refurbish that building, we got the permission to build a new building. You see the one beforehand that, it consisting of a hotel. It will be the first green hotel in Hamburg, Scandic from Scandinavia, and an apartment complex. And we got the permission to put another 2 floors on our tower. And all that has really helped to make this massive investment feasible. I flip through to the slides. And we have to consider our options we had. One was sell it as it is in order to minimize the exposure to the fund, splitting the whole scheme, and or really do the whole refurbishment, the new construction on our own. And we thought the market cycle is right. And we are very lucky now we come into a cycle where the rents in Hamburg are increasing, improving, and that is another very important issue. You have to be right in the cycle. When you fall down with with such a building, we want to chase here the top rents in Hamburg, you have another issue. So we decided to do the whole thing on our own, and it's now fully under construction, will be ready for commission in end of the year. We ourselves, as Union Investment, will move into the lowest 7 floors, and the rest we will lease up to the market. Here are our pre-leases. Union Investment, as I mentioned, Scandic is the hotel operator. So before start of the whole thing, we had a pre-lease level of about 45%. That is very important, not to start completely on spec, and to have a certain pre-lease level, and the rest is now being rented. What have we done with the tower? We completely exchanged the facade. 2,700 window elements had to be exchanged. You have to, that is the lesson I can really recommend to do, not just a little bit facelifting, you have to completely exchange the whole building technique, the facade, otherwise it is not perceived as a new building, and then you don't get the higher rents. In sustainability terms, what are the results? Starting from the right here, we really reduce the operational cost by 61%. You can imagine the old facade was a one-part facade, really consuming a lot of energy. We now have a double facade and a modern heating system, and it is a must. It's not a luxury. The operational costs were more than 10 euros per square meters. It's incredible, and we bring it down to 4 euros, what is acceptable. And carbon emissions are reduced by 1,700 tons per year, so that is very These are very important measures. We receive LEED Gold for that and DGNB, so it will be a certified building in the end. And as I mentioned, for some tenants, this is a very important element. That's in short terms the story about this refurbishment. It is a burden for an owner because you have to accept the rental level in the city, and you cannot increase it just by having these massive refurbishment in front of you. And so you have to adapt the value, reduce the value the years before, so that you can afford such a very big refurbishment.
Right, and you now, did I hear you right that the running costs were 10 euros a square meter before, and now it's 4?
It is. Now it's down to 4, which is normal for a high-rise, and it was unacceptable high, and it was really a must to refurbish. The building was 50 years old, and there was no other way around.
Was it mainly energy costs that was driving?
Yes, mainly energy cost, and our headquarters is next to it, and during summer we could really see how they switched on ventilators in their office buildings. There was no really sun protection, and so it was a challenge. And in that the facade I mentioned here, you can see here it is a double element facade. You can open the windows up to the top level, and the blinds are going between the two window elements, the glass elements, so that is a maximum of comfort you can provide in office buildings, and with that what we provided in that building. The plus is here is it is a building free around it, and the floor plate is very interesting because you have a very good view to each of the sides. So it is not the situation you see it here. By the way, in Paris there's a similar building in La Défense where the headquarters of AXA was, and so you have a really good view to the city from each of the sides. It's not in between a corner and just you have a nice side and a bad side. That's why we like it, and we are very happy to move there.
Peter, did you have a comment? You looked like you wanted to say something about that.
Yes, well, I think Frank said some crucial and very interesting things. First of all, I think that basically all new buildings will be sustainable, just because in all our countries now we have laws that force you to do so. The big problem, like Frank said, is really the existing stock. He said that about, if I remember, 80% of the shopping center or similar buildings he visits are not qualified to be part of his portfolio because just the quality is not good enough. And I think this is the real challenge. What do we do with the huge existing poor stock, not the future buildings? 1 second concerning EPBD, what you mentioned, because I participated in quite a few meetings at UE with EPBD. It's true that by 2020, in theory, all our buildings have to be very low energy buildings. But it's true also in the same directive you read that it has to be cost effective. Now, the question is what you mean by cost effective? And number 3, unfortunately or unfortunately, all member states have the right to define what they mean by low energy building. So I'm not 100% sure that the Italians, the Scandinavians, and the Belgians will have exactly the same view on what is the definition of a low energy building. Like Frank said, and I have to say in the retail industry, in the shopping center industry, we have exactly the same experience. The retailers are not willing to pay €1 extra rent because you tell them I am excellent, BREEAM excellent certified. So this is a cost that have to be supported by the owner, basically, or by the investor. With a situation which is even more difficult in shopping centers, that the energy cost compared to the total service charges represent 15 to 20%. So the impact on the total service charges is much lower than in an office building. Security costs in most shopping centers cost much more than energy costs. So by reducing a little bit your security costs, in fact, you reduce much more your service charges than by dramatically improving your sustainability. And that's clearly an issue.
Just to add, that is a real conflict in our organization between the asset management, and we as from the board driving these measurements and improvings in the buildings, and the fund managers who tell us what is my advantage of having a certified building, a shopping center. Nobody pays for it, and I should pay now thousands of euros. So it's a real conflict, and there it stops being a marketing effort where you really have to push through this policy and even reducing the performance of our assets. And the performance is already pretty low because we all know it's under our pressure from the yield development in the market, and so it's a really inbuilt conflict you have to stand in your organizations.
Just 2 comments. First, I 100% agree that the problem of energy is in the stock. Just to give some numbers, Spain would be, I would say, quite a modern country compared to other countries in Central Europe. We have 25 million housing units, and year demand is about 250,000. So that the problem is really in the stock. Not even if the energy efficiency of new buildings is dramatically increased, the refurbishments of old buildings need to be tackled. And the second point is about EPBD. Of course, it has obviously it is as you said has to be cost effective. That is in the law. But what I'm looking for, I mean, more forward. Things have changed enormously in the last 5 years. If we had this meeting 5 years ago, I don't think we would have even imagined where we are now. I don't think we have even imagined where the study has been introduced by Andries, which 90% are asking for green buildings. What I mean is that this EPBD directive, which has been approved in June and has to be transferred to local codes before 2013, is in a context where there's no international agreement. When there is, and there will be, in my point of view, in the short term, the requirements will get much tougher than what they are now. That is my view.
Of course, and we're down to our last third of the hour. So if there's any questions, please raise your hand. We'll be happy to. We've got someone with a microphone here that'll be happy to take any questions as we go on. So feel free to ask any time. We'll be happy to take any questions. And please say who you are and company you're with.
Yes. Hello, David Marino. I work for a private equity in Sweden. I have a question regarding the comment that you made. Who pays for it? I mean, we understand green is good, but the tenants are not paying more for it. How much of that can you move to the utilities, for example, and how do you do that? I'm thinking of things like district cooling and heating, which we use a lot in Scandinavia. I mean, you move that to the utilities, and the real estate developer doesn't have to pay for it. Is that something that is considered outside?
Don't know whether I understood you right. You mean the utility providers? By reducing the operational cost from 10 euros to 4 euros, it's a must for us. We have really to do this investment in order to compete with modern buildings and with state-of-the-art buildings. So it's to come to this target. It is 100% our investment, and the fund has to raise the necessary means. There's no party where we can move it, but I don't know whether I got you right.
Yes, my question is, in Scandinavia we have things like district cooling and heating, so it's not 100% your investment. The utility is providing those services for you. So you go from having to invest in modernizing your building to just buying services from the utility. The utility is the one making that investment for those utilities, for cooling and heating. Is that something that is considered outside of Scandinavia?
I haven't heard about that in Germany yet. Not in Germany, definitely not. Perhaps in Belgium, the Netherlands.
Just to come back, the discussion around cost. I have a strong view that economics alone is not going to get us to the policy targets that we're looking for. In the UK, we have a 80% reduction target compared to 1990 level by 2050. And the fact of the matter is economics alone is not going to get us there. We will not get there without significant government intervention. It is a fact that the property sector is, from a government overall perspective in terms of all of the sectors in the economy, the sector where carbon savings can be made at the lowest cost. By not making those savings, every time you upgrade a building and you only make a 30% saving, whereas a 90% saving is theoretically possible, you lock in those carbon emissions for the next cycle, for the next investment cycle. But economics will never take you beyond a certain percentage. You're never going to get to the 90% savings just on market forces alone. And that creates a huge problem. And because of that, I think there needs to be recognition that government's intervention, and there needs to be, and not just tax, not just stick or small carrots but real deep intervention to deliver the savings that we are looking to achieve.
And just, Andreas, to you, just going back to these costs of 10 euros a square meter to 4 euros a square meter, as you're an agency or working for an agency, wouldn't your leasing guys be able to get a better, let's say, a better rent for the owner if they're selling or if they're leasing a building at where the costs are 4 euros a square meter as opposed to 10? Or a little bit more motivated to finding the tenants that would pay a bit more in rent? I mean, 10 euros is quite I mean, they're saving 6 euros right there in the service costs.
I think the answer has to be yes. Whether it necessarily translates into higher rents, as I can't tell you. I think the jury's out. Indications are that in some countries, the feedback we're getting is, in France, for example, there is a rental premium. Whether that's true or not, I'm not in the position to say. But we know from surveys with occupiers that they tell us that the difference in rent is a major barrier in France, less so in the UK and elsewhere in Europe. But I have an example of an agency instruction where our agents were able to calculate the difference in cost of occupation based on between a building that we were promoting as versus a building that somebody else was promoting, and the difference equated over the terms of the lease to 2 years rent-free, the reduction in operating costs. So yes, of course, we were able to shift that space on that basis.
Yeah, Frank, it just seems like you should be able to get a lot more rent if you're saving them 6 euros on the operating costs. Is that not happening?
It's a little bit of phantom discussion. 10 euros on occupancy cost is a digital is no-go. You won't find any tenant. So we have more to bring it down to to lower rent levels. No, it's in Hamburg we have a lot of new buildings coming on stream, and we are really competing with the Hafen City, which is a new development scheme, and you have to fight for finding the tenants, and it's a minimum requirement. You have to be competitive with the quality of your building, with the equipment, and with the operational cost. And on top, we want really to get here the highest, the top rent level in Hamburg. And you have to provide something. For one element, for example, is to provide some major service elements. We just signed a lease with for the top floor of this office tower with an event organization, so where all the tenants can book space on the top floor and use it for events, for conferences, and so this add-on is very important for such a top quality building. That brings you interest in tenants. With the cost side, operational costs, you simply have to be competitive. That is nothing in addition what you can get.
Coming to this point of who is paying, of course, I think there are two elements which are, Andries developed one of them. It is, well, through building codes. Building codes are going to get more strict. I mean, we are in the transition. No? The EPBD, the EPBD was came before was 2002, and this one is much more. It's going to be much more. It's still not compulsory. No? It's going to be in 2013 and going to be more strict in the next few years. And of course, the second point is the price of carbon. I mean, I don't think anybody can foresee any solution of this big challenge we have without putting a price to carbon. 50, 60, 70 euros per ton. No? So of course we have to consider that we have to use the market, and the international community will have to set goals to countries which will have an influence on standards, and within that there will be a price of CO2. Not the price we're paying in Europe, which is very artificial, and it's only used within the European community, but a world market of CO2, and the econometric models, they speak about 50 to 100 euros per ton. I think what in your Frank, in your slide, I saw that there was 1,700 tons. That could be 100,000 to 150,000 euros of reduction in cost should the carbon be paid for, which is, I don't foresee any other solution in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. No.
Go ahead.
Perhaps just to add, what could be other driving forces, what we should anticipate. One is valuation. We think in the future we will have a more restrictive valuation, and the valuers, the appraisals will take it more into their consideration, whether you have a sustainable building, yes or no. And the second is regulation, because we are responsible for nearly 50% of all carbon emissions. I think we have to anticipate much stricter regulations, especially for existing stock and future than we see today. Just think about the very strong and strict regulation which has had to be accepted by the automobile industry, and the next industry which will be the building industry, clearly.
Well, in the retail and shopping center industry, as I said before, the percentage, the energy cost represented in the total service charge is not high enough to put a real economical pressure. But on the other hand, let's be frank, the cost of developing an efficient building is not much higher than the cost of developing a lousy building. It's more a question of quality design and thinking of the problem before. So there is no real excuse for not doing it. Number two, and I think that's very interesting, we try to experience in the last shopping center we developed concept which virtually cost nothing, but at the end of the day are extremely efficient in terms of sustainability. I'll give you very quickly 3 simple examples. Rather than providing the usual 200 watts per square meter which you provide to your retailer, we provided 130 watts. To be frank, we had the capacity to provide more because we expected the revolution. The revolution never happened. They just adapt, and everyone who visits this shopping center is nominated for an ICSE award, will not complain about the quality of lighting. Number two, we do not produce any cold. I mean, the cooling of the shopping center is done through a system of water chillers, and it works very well. Number three, and this is maybe the most interesting part, we found out that by benchmarking one retailer against the other one, so not putting pressure on him for anything, but just benchmarking him, and that's what we do, for instance. We have a waste collection, and we on 7 different criteria, so paper, bottles, etc., etc. And then, rather than being a proportion of your service charge, we provide all the retailers with stickers with a barcode. So when their waste is arriving in the place where they are treated, we measure them. I mean, we take their weight, and we know exactly who is producing how many kilos of what. And then we benchmark them, and we can tell one guy selling shoes, how come you produce 20% more waste than another shop producing shoes in the shopping center? And by doing so, it's amazing the reaction you get. And I think this is a nice way for the future, because you don't impose anything on them. You just let them know how good or how bad they are. Because when they are good, you tell them as well.
And what do they say when you tell them they've produced 20% more? What is the reaction? Are they shocked, or they don't know, or they look into it? Or?
Well, you see an evolution. You see an evolution. Sometime we had with a Chinese restaurant, we found out that he was putting his waste in the guy next door, but that was an unusual situation. No, definitely they are conscious, and you see an evolution. Yeah.
So he was very green. You probably shouldn't have said that here. Now all the retailers will start doing the same thing. Yeah? So Luis, Peter just commented on the biggest thing, design, at the beginning. I know you've got a project, is it 4 million square meters now that you're working on? And I think design probably plays a big role into making sure it's sustainable over the next 20, 30, 50 years, yes?
Well, design of course, is the main issue. Of course, but even if I see that, of course, new projects have to give new experiences. The problem is in the stock, because the rate of renovation is very low. Of course, for new projects, well, I see through, I would say, 4 drivers in the design. One is the mobility. Public transport is enormously important for any new design. You have to design so that public transport is used the most possibly. Well, in our project, we have 95% of people who live or people who work who are less than 500 meters from an underground station, from a big capacity transport medium. The second would be energy for buildings, and energy. One solution would be district heating, without any doubt. That has to be studied. And the second is design in buildings. Well, especially we're talking about Spain, but Madrid has quite extreme. Has a cold winter and a hot summer, so that to use efficiently the sun is extremely important. And of course, insulation and infiltration are extremely important. On the fourth vector, the fourth main driving force would be the use of regenerated water within the building, which can and for the cleaning of the streets and for public spaces, which can reduce about 30 to 35, one third of the water use. So, of course, design is something which can cost very little and can give highly positive returns. With returns which can be investments which can be returned in a very short time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years maximum.
Great, thank you. I see we're coming down to our last couple of minutes here of time. So I'd just like to start with Frank. And Frank, if you have any last comments or pearls of wisdom or things you would like to let us know, please. We'll just go through the thing. And any last words, please.
I think in 5 years from now on, we are in a bigger auditorium here on MIPIM than this one. So it will go ahead with this development, and we all have to work out our systems and developing from marketing efforts to more serious ones. It will take some time, but we keep this process, and we are already preparing the next stage, a certain carbon effective portfolio management, which is a procedure we want to introduce in our funds. So we think it is important, and we will invest in that.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, I think there is still one challenge we'll all have to face, and no one really talks about it, is how to develop efficient buildings without jeopardizing architectural quality in terms of aesthetical issues, because this is really a challenge for architects to design nice buildings, good-looking buildings where you feel well, and at the same time very efficient buildings in terms of sustainability.
I think I just want to say I'm quite excited by this time. I think there is change happening in the market. There's a commercialization of sustainability. I think it is gathering momentum. It has moved from, and I said the same thing this morning, it has moved from the bearded sandal brigade to the guys in suits, which is a good start. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think there's a huge accounting challenge in the sense that we're not applying life cycle thinking yet in the way that we should. If you consider that design is, and these are rough figures, typically about 2% of a building's life cycle cost. Construction cost may be around 18%. The other 80% is maintenance and operation. And don't quote me on the figures, but it's that sort of proportions, then it absolutely makes sense. But you have to find a way to think about life cycle costs at every stage, every step of the way.
Great. And Luis, any last comments?
Well, my last comment is that well, our model of development seems extraordinarily fragile, and that we have made extraordinary advances, but nothing to do what we are challenged to do in the very near future.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This will conclude our panel. I'd like to, if we could have a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much for all your work and time in this, and of course, thanking IPD for being the sponsor of this, and of course, MIPIM for putting together such a great event. So, have a great rest of MIPIM and enjoy yourselves. And I hope we'll see each other next year.